SellerSnap is a powerful repricing software that I've been using to help increase margins and increase sales at the same time running my $6 million Amazon business. I think this software is a great addition to the tools used by especially established Amazon sellers with a little bit of budget to put into repricing software. And so in this video, I'm going to show you a ton of tips and tricks that I've used to personally increase the profit that I make in my Amazon business. And just in case you're not familiar with repricing software, I want to quickly show you how it works by setting up an example. So on this chart, I've been able to automatically import my costs into SellerSnap by integrating this with Box, and that's the software I use for listing and analytics, and then I'll explain that later. On the main page of SellerSnap, you'll be able to see lots of different options for all of your products. You can also configure all of these different columns, so if you want to see different data than I like to see, you can go for it. Just keep in mind this is fully customizable, but just to show you how it works, take this example where I've had my cost imported from Boxum, and in this example I paid $6 for this product. Right now I don't have a minimum and maximum price set, and the repricing is off. That's a user input you need to do to use a repricer. And obviously I'll get really technical here in just a second, but in this example, if I bought this for $6, right now I can see the buy box is at $21. So I have plenty of wiggle room for margin in this case. And before the repricer can come into effect, we need to set a minimum and maximum price. That's basically based on the rules that we're going to set up together. What is the minimum price that I'm going to allow the repricer to automatically lower things to? And same thing. Hopefully the logic is pretty simple there, or just the prices that it's going to allow the item to go between. And by the way, before we keep diving in, getting technical with it, if you do end up checking out SellerSnap, make sure you use the link down below. I'm putting a ton of free repricing knowledge into this video, and if you use that link down below, that really helps me out a ton, so I'd really appreciate it. And in this example, I'm usually going to jump into the actual item. So in this case, I can see the price history of the product, and in this case, I can see it's been pretty consistently selling for like at least $21 here for quite a while. So in this case, I'd probably go ahead and set my minimum price at $21. The maximum price, you can either think about this really closely and set that at like the highest price that you've seen consistent sales if you're looking at that Keep a chart, or honestly on most listings I tend to just go like double to 3 times that minimum price. When it's an item that I have a lot of units on, I might more closely watch that, but we can just go ahead and set that at $62. And I also, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and turn my repricing on. For this, I'm going to use the standard repricing rules that I use for the vast majority of my listings. For most of my listings on SellerSnap, I use about 2 different rules, and I'll show you how those work here. But now that we've got the repricing rules set up, SellerSnap knows the range that I want my price to stay in, and I've preset the rules that it needs to follow while it's staying within that range. We're going to get into some technical knowledge on how to reprice faster than that, but to get to this next step of the process, I want to show you how to set up each of these individual repricing rules, because this part is really important, and if you do it wrong, it can cost you a lot of profit. If you do it correctly, you will end up making way more profit than before. So let me just quickly walk you through the standard rule. I use this for the vast majority of my products. I also have a separate rule that I'll switch it to if I've been stuck with the product for a while and it's just not selling very well for me. I'll show you how that works, but this is a relatively simple repricing rule that's been treating my profit pretty well. And what I've noticed about using SellerSnap in particular is it just tends to drag prices up a lot more than other repricers I've tested out. It's definitely not the most affordable repricer. It definitely operates at that quality where I'd expect given the price point for SellerSnap, but especially for my Amazon business, now that we're doing pretty decent numbers I'm happy with, it definitely makes a lot of sense. And as I go in here, we need to first off start out by setting the default repricing method. So there's lots of different options for this. The one that you'll most likely want to go with is just the AI repricer. That's the reason why you would pay for something like SellerSnap. The internal rules that it's going to follow are often just going to be the best case scenario, but we can definitely expand on that. And one way that I like to expand on that is by applying a yo-yo. So what this does is, in this example in my settings, every 240 minutes, so every few hours, I'm going to increase my price and stay at that maximum price for 20 minutes. And now initially you might think that's a long time for prices to be sitting up higher for no reason and potentially not making sales. But what you'll notice on a lot of listings is other Amazon sellers repricers are simply set to follow other Amazon sellers around. So something like this where I raise my price every few hours for 20 minutes, that's going to give those other repricers, sometimes it takes 15 minutes for a lot of repricers to change prices and follow your price around and that kind of thing. So that gives me 20 minutes for their repricer to be like, oh, this person, they raised their price, let's raise our price with them. So it's one of those simple ways that we're able to increase profit over time, because the natural tendency of basically every product you sell on Amazon is that competition is going to want to drive that price down. So using the AI repricer, using the yo-yo method, a couple other things we can do, we want to make sure that we are increasing our sales for as many ways as possible, right? The next thing I like to do personally is I could get a little bit more aggressive if I have not made a sale recently. So you can tweak this hour range, whatever is reasonable for your store. I've tweaked this a good amount and I found that 24 hours is a pretty good range where if a certain item doesn't sell within 24 hours, I want it to get a little more aggressive. I want it to try to win the buy box. In this case, I want it to win half the buy box. If you try to make it win all of the buy box, it tends to get a little bit too aggressive on pricing and that kind of thing. And I've even seen some differing opinions on how to set this up, but that's how I like to set mine up, and it's definitely helped my profit as as well. Another simple rule I add on to this as well is if it's back ordered, go ahead and set my price to maximum price. Pretty simple, but if my product's not checked in at Amazon and I'm not really likely to make sales, I don't want my pricing to get in there and start competing with people and maybe even having their repricers start lowering prices because I'm competing with them and that kind of thing, right? I want to make sure that my price is as high as possible until I can actually genuinely start making sales. And so being on back order is basically just when those items are checking into Amazon FBA. And I want to set that to my max price. Another thing you can take advantage of is changing the price when the buy box is suppressed. So if the buy box is suppressed and you're not at the minimum price, so it's within your range, it's within that pricing range, instead of targeting the buy box, I want it to target the low FBA price, and specifically the low FBA that's actually in stock in this case, which is why I ignore the back ordered competitors. And then typically I'm just going to match their price, because on a listing with no buy box where there's no add to cart button like most Amazon listings will have, instead of targeting the buy box, which is often not the lowest price on the listing, I do have to put more effort into being the lowest price, or at least tied for the lowest price, so that when somebody goes in and manually selects who they're buying from, they're going to be more likely to buy from me. And as far as the standard repricing rule I set up, I also have a more aggressive rule. This is something I only use on listings that I've had it in stock for quite a while. I would recommend setting up something like this, but again, it's just a little bit more aggressive, and I just have it tagged as not making revenue. It's more aggressive, that kind of thing. Very similar Repricer, same yo-yo method, that kind of thing. Where it gets a little bit more aggressive is if I'm not making a purchase within the last few days, so not 24 hours, but last few days. And again, this is only something I'll apply to stuff that's just not selling. Instead of targeting the buy box, I tend to follow the lowest FBA and try to undercut that price by a little bit. This is a rule that I'll use on things that maybe the item itself got less popular or it's out of season, that kind of thing. So on items where I have this set up, I'm really aggressively targeting winning the vast majority of the sales. This is not a profit boosting repricing rule. Keep that in mind. Don't set this on to something that you're wanting to squeeze a lot of profit on. This is just a delete button. That's how I like to look at it. So I'm basically going to be undercutting sellers when I'm not making sales for several days. So it gives it plenty of wiggle room to be in there and making sales. And then I'm also going to check for those items where the buy box is suppressed, and I'm going to follow that lowest FBA price. And instead of matching them, I'm going to undercut them by 1%, because when you're undercutting people, it does actually matter. If you're on a buy box suppressed listing, being 1 penny cheaper will make you appear higher. When you're on a listing with a buy box, it doesn't matter. There's no reason to be the cheapest person on the listing. In fact, generally you should be a little bit more expensive than the cheapest price, and you'll typically make the same amount of sales. But those are the two major repricing rules that I use on pretty much everything. So you can copy those, tweak those as you see fit. And there's also a ton more stuff you can play around with. So I'll just show you some of the other conditions here. So let's say you have a specific competitor you're dealing with on a lot of your listings. You can exclude them or change your repricing behavior based on what you're running into. Another one that I've debated doing a little bit is something like setting a repricing rule based on fulfillable quantity. So one thing that could be really useful for this is, let's say when I get below 5 units in stock, I want to really be making as much profit as possible, right? When you're down to your last couple units of a product, especially if you can't restock, it makes total sense to go out screaming, right? You want to be making as much profit as possible. So you can even do something like just following the buy box, except you increase the amount of profit you're looking for on a percentage basis. Again, these aren't things that I have set on my repricing rule, but there's just a lot of different things you can do. Another good one that is nice to take advantage of is during a certain time of day. Let's say you're during the middle of the night. If you want to raise your prices and again, give those listings a chance to breathe and profit to increase, you can go in here and set, but at 2 a.m., I want you to raise my FBA buy box price by 10% above the buy box, right? That's something I've definitely done with other repricers as well, but I don't need to worry about it typically with SellerSnap because I'm able to yo-yo. I like increasing my price as often as possible throughout the day rather than just like specific times, but that's also another great way to take advantage of this. Raising your prices on the middle of the night is a really fundamental way to gradually increase the price on those listings you're on. Another quick settings tweak I want to run through with you is, I'm not going to run through every single setting on SellerSnap because that's a little bit boring. You can play around with that kind of thing, but another quick tweak I would recommend messing with is the suppressed buy box behavior. So again, on those listings where there's no buy box, we usually need to be the cheapest price and not just targeting the buy box. So it is smart to go in here and make sure that all this makes sense. The first thing on an FBA listing, you probably want to be at the low FBA in stock, right? And it's just going to go down in order based on who it's competing with, basically. So if there's no low FBA to compete with and there's a low FBM, then bang, I'm going to increase my price a little bit. Typically, you can still charge a prime bump, charging that extra amount of money if you are an FBA seller compared to FBM sellers. Even with a suppressed buy box, you can charge that prime premium. And then if there's still no FBA or FBM competitors to compete with, I'm going to put a big multiplier on the minimum price of that product. Typically, my minimum prices I'm going to set around my ideal ROI. Typically only going to lower prices if things don't go so well, which I'm going to talk about. I'll show you how to track that in bulk and not doing it one by one. But on the FBM listings with suppressed buy boxes, you can also tweak a couple of those things there. You can copy that. We talked about that already. But that's where I want to go ahead and hop back into the inventory view. And this is where we can actually make the magic happen, raise prices, lower prices, change repricing rules, that kind of thing. And one thing that I would recommend taking advantage of is all the different filters, and specifically saving some of the presets on here. So one example that I want to pull up here for you is this, where we have inventory that's either in stock or back ordered. We're not winning the buy box, so we haven't won the buy box lately. And in this example, this is inventory that's 2 to 3 months old, right? So we've had it for a little bit, it's not selling super well, and we need to do a little bit of magic to start making sales, right? So you can go in through here and change your min prices right here. There's also some ways, if we go in here and edit these in bulk, we can also change this based on a minimum markup and that kind of thing. What has made a lot more sense for me personally though, and this might just be how I think, but typically what I'll do when I want to change what I'm looking at in bulk on SellerSnap is I'll just work with a simple import. So in this example, I would go ahead and export all of these items, and this is just going to help me change what I'm doing on this product, all 51 of these items at a time. If you want to more closely monitor each and every listing, you definitely can, but as you're scaling, it doesn't make a lot of sense to get super granular with every single product, especially ones that in this example, we're just trying to add a little bit of momentum to see if we can get those selling. And what we need to do is take that file that we just downloaded, and then I'll typically throw it into a Google Sheet. I've got a couple different use cases already preloaded for us here. So in this case, here's all those 50 products that for me haven't sold too much and they're at least 2 to 3 months old. So these are things where I need to try to get some things moving a little bit, right? So in this case, one of the simpler things you can do to get those prices lowering is I'll just take a simple formula here. So I just go equals, and I'll take that minimum price, and then I just want to lower it by 10% basically. And then for these items, I've had them for 60 plus days. Instead of tracking each and every product individually, I can just do times 0.90 is what I'm probably gonna do for this example. And that's going to automatically lower the minimum price on all these by 10%, thinking pretty logically there. And then I'll just go ahead and copy that right there, paste it in the min price column. And now I have adjusted all of these prices and lowered them by 10%. So it makes total sense, right? Just go ahead and press file and then download that as a CSV. And then I can go back over here into SellerSnap, press import, and then just choose that file and import it. Typically takes a minute or two. It's going to load into SellerSnap, and then all that magic is going to be done for me. Keep in mind that like we did with this initial listing, it's usually smarter to go in here and set the minimum and maximum price manually. At least the minimum price, you can set that manually based on what's going to be a consistent price that you're actually interested in selling on. Looking at the actual product, it is valuable. After you're just trying to sell things that aren't going so well, you can definitely do that in bulk. Doing it in bulk is something that I've allowed myself to do as I've scaled as an Amazon seller, and I've realized it doesn't make that much of a difference. And while we're getting into the more nitty gritty, I do also want to show you a couple other filters that have been extremely useful for me. So one of them are items that are in stock, but I'm not currently repricing. So as you're checking items in and they're actually arriving at Amazon, you don't want those products to be actively repricing. And this is something I pretty much do every couple days, that kind of thing. So in this case, it seems like right now I have 22 items that I have inventory at the FBA warehouse, but I don't have a minimum set. So really simple filter, but it's just kind of one of those easy, quick things to check. And then as it checks in, I'll go ahead and then go set a minimum and maximum price. That has a couple benefits. The main one being that the prices can change while you're waiting for inventory to check in. So the decision you make on the day you list it versus the decision you make on the day that it actually checks in at Amazon, it's usually going to be a different decision. And that's also going to prevent you from accidentally having your repricer competing with other Amazon sellers, lowering prices, raising prices, that kind of thing, while you're not even able to make sales. There's no reason to add price pressure to a listing if you can't even make the sale, right? That's just a simple thing. And then I'll go in and set those repricing rules after it's actually checked in. This is just like a simple way to find them. Another simpler example you can take advantage of is the competing with Amazon filter. So whenever you're competing with Amazon, you typically have to be a little bit more aggressive. They're not going to share the buy box with you like selling with another third-party seller will. So here in this case, I can see, looks like I've got 16 products where I am or was competing with Amazon. You can also add a filter where you actually have items in stock on this as well, so you're not looking at random products. But on these items where you're competing with Amazon, you probably need to go in and lower prices a little bit or set it to a more aggressive rule, especially if Amazon is hogging all the buy box. And then you'll also notice that on all of these listings where, again, we've got the in stock but not repricing yet filter on here, you also notice that I actually have the cost automatically in here, and that is imported by the integrations within SellerSnap. So you're going to want to go ahead and head into your settings, go to integrations, and then you can configure that Boxum integration. So the software that you need to make shipments and track your profit, analytics, all that kind of stuff, you can have that automatically importing your costs into SellerSnap. So if you're using that to help make any decisions, that kind of thing, if you end up doing any bulk repricing based on the current cost, that's also really helpful. Another way I'll use the bulk repricing on here is I'll go in here and I will set the minimum price based on my cost, because generally you're going to want to sell your items for about 2 times what you're buying them for. If you're getting really lazy with it, sometimes you can just set the minimum price based on 2x multiplier of the cost. So that's one of those really helpful things to have auto imported through Boxum for sure. But now you have all the technical knowledge on how to set up SellerSnap and start to see some profit increases in your Amazon business. I can say that since I started using SellerSnap in my business, it's definitely been very beneficial for my overall profit margins. And if you also end up checking out SellerSnap, please feel free to use that that link down below. That's a big help for me if you found this video valuable. If you made it this far and you have any questions, drop those down below in the comment section. Always happy to chop it up with you guys down below. And on your way out, if you want to help me out for free, hit the like button, subscribe button, all that good stuff helps me out. But I really appreciate you watching this video. And if you want to learn exactly how to find your next profitable Amazon product, click this video right here.